In this corner, the DC Multiverse Hush Batman, and in this corner, the DC Multiverse Knighfall Batman. I've previously pitted these two against each other to figure out which blue and gray Batman was better. Today, we're gonna figure out which black and gray is best. Place your bets. It's time for a versus rematch. Starting with the packaging, and what's interesting is that these mostly come in the same box that they originally came in. Knighfall specifies it's a black suit variant, whereas Hush does not. That said, the UPC does say that Hush is a variant. Here's that for those looking for him, by the way. And here's the one for Knighfall. The only other major difference for Knighfall is the back. Instead of just using new black and gray Batman artwork, they made the original artwork black and white. It's interesting because if you saw my original video on this, I pointed out that he really doesn't look like this anyway. And he certainly didn't wear this costume in the Knighfall comic. Black and gray Batman is such an iconic look that they didn't really have to tie it to Knighfall. It's not a problem that they did, it just feels unnecessary. It's interesting because they used the exact same artwork for Hush but didn't change the colors at all. And it's funny because he's definitely wearing blue and gray. Similar to Knighfall, he never actually wore black and gray in the Hush story. Honestly, I think it's just a matter of using Hush and Knighfall as a shorthand for these costumes makes it easier. As a closer approximation of what we're actually getting in the box though, for packaging, this round goes to Hush. Moving on to presentation, and in the tops of their scalps, Knighfall stands at 7 inches, whereas Hush stands at a little over 7 1/4. Knighfall, naturally, is complete reuse of the blue and gray version of the same figure, in the same way that Hush is a reissue of the blue and gray version that came out last year. It's also a kinda sorta reissue of the 2-pack version, which came out with a different head and slightly different accessories. In addition, from changing from blue to black, the gray on the new figure is a little bit darker and a much better shade. I really wish they used this gray on the original blue version. Putting these two side by side, we can see that those color differences aren't quite as superficial. The new figure's parts were simply cast in black and gray, with the only paint detail being the gloves and possibly utility belt. With blue and gray, the entire figure's been painted. We can see shadows in the mask that really help the eyes to pop. Same thing with the cape. I'd be a liar if I didn't say I preferred this shade of gray, but in general it does feel like a lot more effort went into this one. Between previous versions of Hush, as well as year 2 and 3 Jokers, we've seen variations on this body several times before, whereas the Knighfall body was new to the palette when it first came out. I like all the little fabric tugs, making it feel like an actual costume, though we do get a little bit of that with Hush. The cape on Hush definitely takes more space, but compared to Knighfall is at least a little bit more symmetrical. If I'm honest, I've never really been crazy about how it just kinda juts out to one side. As for the cowl attached to that cape, both head sculpts are very solid, though admittedly I do wish his nose was just a little bit more covered here, but as far as I'm concerned, both options are ideal comic-style Batman heads for their respective articulation types. If you've watched enough of my channel, you know I'm a sucker for a black and gray Batman with an oval logo and a capsule belt. In fact, I recently made a whole video dedicated to my custom version. That said, despite minor quibbles like how Hush's shoulders hang, or how Knighfall's cape juts out to one side, I genuinely feel that both figures are awesome representations of their respective looks. Last time, Knighfall got the edge because it was brand new versus a lot of reuse with Hush. This time they're both all reuse, so neither one has an edge. For presentation, this round is a draw. Moving on to posability, and we have a pretty good idea of what to expect from these two, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. Knighfall has a dumbbell joint here, Hush has a ball joint down here. Knighfall clearly can look up higher, but Hush can look down lower. Hush also gets the better tilt, but both get all the way around. Moving down, and Hush can raise his arm higher. Both figures have rotator cuffs, but Knighfall has more range. Each Batman has bicep swivel, with Knighfall having the deeper bend. At the ends of the arms, and both figures have wrist balls that can swivel and hinge in any direction. Shifting to the torso, and both Batman have diaphragm joints and dumbbell waists. Hush has the deeper arch back, so deep in fact you actually get a bit of a gap. Hunching forward though, with Knighfall definitely has the edge. Pretty equivalent amount of tilt, with Hush maybe being slightly better, but both figures can twist. Below the utility belts, and both have the McFarlane style hips. Knighfall has the superior kick, but both figures get perfect splits. Traveling down the leg, and both figures get twist in the hip. though I do think Hush maybe has just a little bit more. They also have double jointed knees, with Hush having the deeper bend, equivalent toe articulation, but while both can swivel and hinge, Knighfall has the deeper pivot. In terms of articulation, Hush does have some advantages over Knighfall, but Knighfall can look up, has better range in the arms and a better hunch forward, as well as a higher kick and a deeper ankle pivot. Reversing my decision from the last match, and for posability, this round goes to Knighfall. Moving on to playability, and of course each Batman comes with a trading card. As we can see though, this one was cut a bit wahoozy. They also have matching figure stands. Hush includes two bright silver batarangs that really pop, and while his left hand isn't exactly a grippy, he can hold on to both of them at the same time. He also comes with alternate fists, but there are a couple of caveats. As usual, these are from the three Jokers, so they don't actually match the other hands that he comes with. Additionally, the right hand still has the kryptonite ring. On the one hand, it's kinda cool to finally have a black costume version of that you can possibly put on other Batman figures. On the other hand, I kind of would have preferred just a normal fist. Knighfall, by contrast, does have two normal fists. For those who are wondering, it's way too loose for Hush, but Knighfall can use the kryptonite ring. It's just a bit big on him. Conversely, Knighfall has a pair of accessory holding hands, but alas, only one lone batarang. Of course, playability is more than just poorly cut trading cards, batarangs, and kryptonite rings. It's also about how well your figures play with others. Starting with just a few black and gray oval bats, and here we have Combat Belt Batman, DC Universe Classics, and an Arkham Asylum 4-pack version by DC Direct. Moving over to the Justice League though, and here's Action Comics 1000 Superman, Hush Superman with his real estate hogging cape, and DC Classic Superman. Completing the DC Trinity, and here we have the Collector Edition Wonder Woman. As for the Flash, and here's a Target exclusive Flashpoint version, and the Rebirth version, which if you wanted to, you could always pretend is Wally. Here we have the Silver Age Hal Jordan, but for the JLA era Green Lantern, and here we have Kyle Rayner. Capping off the league is Endless Winter Aquaman with the Barry Allen Flashpoint alternate head, and the hook-handed JLA version. From the Justice League to the Batman family, and here's Robin, the Boy Wonder, Knighfall, Tim Drake, who's sadly a bit tall for Knighfall Batman, and the Rebirth era Damian Wayne. For the second Robin, Jason Todd, all grown up, and here we have the New 52 version of the Red Hood, and Red Hood from the Three Jokers. For the grown-up first Robin, Dick Grayson, and here we have the Better Than Batman version of Nightwing, and Nightwing from the Titans Beast Boy Build-A-Wave. Lastly for the Bat family, and here we have Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl. Batgirl's a very appropriate segue to the Joker and to Batman's gallery of rogues. Here's the Rebirth version, Mortal Kombat 11, and the Three Jokers Clown. Next up is the neon-vested classic Penguin we just looked at, but for those of you whose tastes skew a bit grittier, and here we have Arkham City. On that note is Arkham City Catwoman, which is the closest thing we have to a Hush Catwoman in this scale, but for something a bit more classic, and here we have Knighfall. Next up, and here we have the classic version of the Prince of Puzzlers, but as I wait for McFarlane to announce a Hush or Capullo version of Riddler, here we have Arkham City. Next up is Deathstroke the Terminator, and lastly, in the spirit of Hush Batman, here we have Hush himself. Also, for those interested, here's Knighfall with my black and gray custom. As you can see, it's bigger than Knighfall, but not quite as big as Hush. For a relative scale comparison, here are Batman with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, hidden in the shadows is Stealth Iron Man.
I was born in the dark.
One thing I'm sure a lot of you were curious about, however, are head swaps. I've got about 20 head swaps planned for this guy, so unfortunately, he's gonna have to wait for his own video. That said, we can definitely look at some Hush options. First up, and here's a Battle Damage Dark Knight's Death Metal version. I really like the potential of this look. The head's a great fit, and I like the idea of trying to customize this into a proper Rebirth Batman that might scale with Three Jokers and Hush. Other way around though, and this looks ridiculous. In the right context, this head is fine, but not with this neck on this body. Next up, and here's Three Jokers. With this being the head I used for my black and gray custom, obviously I love this combination. I also think it's closer to Jason Fabek's artwork from the Three Jokers comic. On the flip side, I don't think this works as well. This cowl has a crackly texture that doesn't really match the rest of the figure, and the face looks a bit small for the body. For an all-black repaint with Three Jokers, and here's JLA. Since I just showed you the Three Jokers head on the Hush body, I'm not going to bother doing it again. But just like with Three Jokers, I do feel like the Hush head does elevate this figure. It is supposed to be a Keaton tribute though, so the ears should be longer. Here is the Spawn 2-pack version with his gargantuan cape. Intellectually, I know that this head is a great facsimile of the Troika suit, but being honest, I just don't personally like it. This, however, I adore. The pointy ears and shoulders complement each other very well, and if you saw my Spawn vs. JLA versus, you'd know this is what I think the JLA Batman should have been. And lastly, here we have Detective Comics 27. The idea of a long-eared Hush seems kinda strange, but for me, it looks a lot like the Long Halloween. On the flip side, since Batman's ears were shorter inside of Detective Comics 27, this could be a possibility. Not quite accurate to what the mask looked like in the comic, but there's something there. Scaling-wise, neither one is ideal. Hush skews a bit too big, and Knighfall skewing a bit too short. If you're committed to making Knighfall the Batman of your collection, there are configurations of different figures you can try, but by and large, I think that Knighfall works better in your Justice League, with Hush as the head of your Batman family. As I said before, I would have preferred two matching fists, but the idea of getting an accessory we can use on other figures is pretty cool. Additionally, Hush just plain comes with more, and while this Batman might be a bit big, I do think it's easier to fudge a taller character into your display than a shorter one. For playability, this round goes to Hush. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Depending on where you get them, both Batmen retail for between $20 to $23. Unfortunately, as of this recording, they're both sold out at most online retailers. In fact, this morning I found both of them on GameStop, with Knighfall also on Best Buy. That said, I would remind you that Knighfall is new and hasn't even really made it to stores yet, so don't give up hope. For price, I'm calling this round a draw, but the battle goes to Hush 4-3. Agree? Disagree? Sound off in the comments below. While you're down there, let me know if you'd like to see a comparison video between Knighfall and my custom. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.